Hey everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, legacy precious metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world, war and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
Do you want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Collins. Welcome back to the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad to have you with us. Going to take a quick today. Today's going to be one of those quick, let's hit a lot of topics that have sort of a common theme, and that is this idea that the liberal agenda of the Biden administration and what we are seeing is backfired on them to such extent that they're losing people and losing the articles of that are out there that have now just left them in a state of disarray. They can't seem to focus. They've just gotten, the Biden administration goes from one mess to another. And you even got Dr. Jill Biden basically saying, we wanted to do so much and we had all these hopes and dreams that the president wanted to do. But then she says, but all of these other things happened and everything that gets in the way and world events and people standing in the way. The only thing I can simply say is that's what the presidency is about. And what we're seeing right now is, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of people in the Biden administration seemingly be disconnected from the world. But to first start, where I want to start tonight is this disconnect from the world. I want to say this, and which will start off as basically the title of this whole episode is: if you've lost Starbucks, you probably need to take another look. Starbucks has been a corporation that, for all intents and purposes, I enjoy their coffee. I've been to the original store out at Pikes Market. They were very good to send troops coffee when I was in the Middle East and Iraq. But over time, you have seen that Starbucks has been in the middle of a lot of the more progressive ideas and woke ideas from a corporate culture that we've seen. And what was really interesting to me is what happened just over the past couple of weeks, and that is Starbucks is closing 16 of its stores. What is interesting about this is not necessarily that a business is closing stores. It's going to build into this theme and this narrative that the liberal policies right now are not working. Why do I say that? 16 major stores were closed, and they were closed in Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle in particular. Now, Seattle should be noteworthy since that is Starbucks' home in Seattle. The other problems of this is that they were in cities that are Democrat-run cities in which crime has become the overriding burden. Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz basically laid it out. His concerns were, and this was a video that was sent to the stores, he said that he talks to the employees, he said, this is just the beginning, there's going to be many more. He said that the stores were not safe. If you just put it into simple terms, they're closing some of the locations that have experienced a high volume of challenging incidents that make it unsafe to continue to operate and to open new locations with safer conditions. Now, he's heard retail employees express concerns about safety in their enlisting sessions executive had over the past year, including mental illness, homelessness, and crime. And we're facing these things which stores were not built for, forcing them to close despite their remaining profitable. The interesting part is that now these stores are being closed in areas in which the crime rates and the issues that have been so prominent of the left over the past year are just continuing to fall out. And if you're losing the corporate world and you're losing the Starbucks of the world, what's next? And I think this is the part that I want to emphasize here. When you start looking at this criminal justice, and we've spoken a lot here on the Doug Collins podcast about criminal justice reform. Criminal justice reform, as we've talked about, is matching the punishment to the crime. It's taking a holistic approach to saying, here is the problems that we're experiencing and the crimes that are being committed, and here's how we're dealing with those crimes in the best possible function for society, and that includes the individuals who are going through the justice system. What we're seeing is when you have cities such as Seattle and Portland and Los Angeles that are complete and utter crime zones. I mean, you could almost put crime scene tape around the entire cities. Then you're seeing that it not only affects the people who are there, it begins to affect the businesses there. Businesses, at the end of the day, no matter how woke they may be or how corporately structured they may be, they at the end of the day have to answer to their employees, their stockholders, and they have to deliver a profit. Now, what's interesting in this case is that Schultz actually said that some of these locations were profitable. It's not a matter of profitability. It was about the safety of their workers and the safety of those who come into these stores. And when you have rampant homelessness, when you have crime that is on the rise, when you have drug use that is just continually growing, and you see this in cities like Los Angeles and Portland, Seattle, San Francisco comes to mind as well. If you're losing these corporations that want to be on the, quote, cutting edge of more liberal ideas and thoughts, then you're really going to have to take a look in these cities to say, what are we really doing? And I think this is the part and the problem that I am wanting to bring out here is that when you lost Starbucks, it may be time to refigure your route. When these cities cannot come together to make a safe environment for the companies, for the people, for the families that work there, then you're going to have problems that are going to be outlasting these businesses closing or these businesses moving to the suburbs or moving to other areas. I thought it was very cryptic in the way that Starbucks announced it, saying that they were going to rebuild these stores or possibly build these other stores in safer areas. I think we've seen this before. They're going to be moving out into areas in which the police departments are actually functional, in which there's not open drug use, in which there's not a homelessness crisis that forces people inside to live into the, in essence, live in stores. And this is going to continue the degradation of these cities, both from and it's happening from the inside out. So as we get into this and when we talk about this, I often talk about how we do criminal justice and the fact that criminal justice reform, from DAs who say they're not going to prosecute crimes to DAs who reclassified crimes that were once felonies down to misdemeanors, you're not having a bail process, letting people go, not evaluating the cases before them. This is what you begin to see, and you begin to see it when the indication is that we don't support law and order, that we don't support a fair justice system, when we don't have everybody equal under the law, then this is what actually begins to happen. And these cities who are promoting these ideas, who are promoting these concepts from their district attorneys and others, are asking for more than just Starbucks over the next little bit to begin to leave. And when these begin to leave, then you're going to have more and more of a problem with unemployment. You're going to have a rise in the very things that you're trying to move away from, because without the jobs, without the companies involved in these places, then you're going to continue to just have problems that exist and no way to get out of them. I really challenge these big cities, and we've seen them democratically run for years, that are constantly having these problems. Now, I can talk about the problems that they're having, but when you see companies who are actually leaving the cities or changing locations because they don't feel safe or their employees don't feel safe, this is a problem that they can't ignore anymore. Now, you can try and put a nice face on it. You can cover it up. You can and just try to not talk about it, which is what is interestingly enough, a lot of the mainstream media is not doing. But that's not going to be your long-term solution here. The long-term solution is finding a way to have progressive criminal justice reform, have a working relationship with your police and your law enforcement officials that they can be able to carry out their jobs, keep the community safe, and work with the communities in which they're in so that businesses and people both feel that they can live and prosper in these cities. Again, this is what happens, the real practical, real world results of liberal policies that have gone haywire. When you stick to your policies and you don't admit the real world application, that's when you got problems. Let's go to the next one. Over the past weekend, President Biden visited Saudi Arabia. Now, here is again the way that the left chooses to frame issues, and I'm including the media here as well as activists. The left have been in just total uproar about Joe Biden going to the Middle East. And they went by Israel, which again probably set off some of the squad, and that they wasn't happy that he said that we had a very strong relationship with Israel and that we've always had a strong relationship with Israel and would continue to have that strong relationship with Israel. Probably not the best thing for some of his more liberal base, but he went anyway to his credit. Then he had added on, and this has been going on for about a month now, he added on a trip to Saudi Arabia, and he met with the Crown Prince. And the only discussion that has really come out of the mainstream media and from activist groups is, how would you have met with a government that killed the journalist Khashoggi? How would you do that? You killed an American, you killed this journalist. You're and calling up the problems that Saudi Arabia is, in their eyes, has been doing. Now, look, I'm not denying the wrongfulness of that. I think it is something that it should be addressed. Saudi Arabia has had a lot of things over the years that should be addressed that, and many times have been passed over. The reason I bring this one up, and the reason that I want to focus on this for a minute, is that the media and the activists and the all of those who are upset about Joe Biden fist bumping the Crown Prince and actually engaging in dialogue, in my mind, they're taking the true emphasis off of why Joe Biden actually went to Saudi Arabia. Now let's get this straight. He didn't go for a field trip and an adventure. He didn't go to to do anything else except talk about the one thing that is driving this administration nuts right now, and that is the high gas prices and inflation. They know now. They've tried to blame everybody. They know that the American people are watching. They know this is hurting their poll numbers. In fact, Joe Biden claims the lowest approval ratings of any president that has ever been, and at the same time in the administrations, he is well below where President Trump was, President Obama, and others. So the question is what's the media? Why the outrage? Abundance of outrage over Joe Biden going to Saudi Arabia. Well, they're using the issue of the journalist who was killed and the human rights issues of Saudi Arabia, which only rarely come up in many of these conversations, to cover up what I believe is their real concern is they don't want it to be known, and they don't want to highlight the fact that Joe Biden is going to get oil. This has become the two-step that the media is playing. They want to try and trade on the fact that we have this human rights story and that Joe Biden should be appalled, and that Joe Biden has said that he was going to reset with Saudi Arabia. He would never consider them a friendly territory, so to speak, and that he would hold them accountable. Well, the real problem now is that the left is just bent on making sure that we use this oil and gasoline shortage and the prices of diesel to affect change. This is what they're wanting to do, and it's really troublesome for them to realize that the president is going to the Middle East to beg for more oil, when at the same time they have worked everything they could through this administration, starting from day one, to begin a different process of changing the quote thought on fossil fuels. I mean, we stopped the Keystone Pipeline day one. We've interrupted oil and gas leases. We've not even considered, building a new refinery space so that if we, with the oil and gas that we have, that we could put that into refined product to go into the market. We've talked, this administration has talked ad nauseum about wind energy and solar energy and, hydroelectric energy. But God forbid we talk about nuclear energy. This is about changing hearts and minds. And this is why I started this, is when you're starting to lose the left, you're starting to lose the problem. And there are people now that they realize that they're losing voters, they're losing support because the policies that they put in place have caused, frankly, the opposite effect. And whether it's the gas prices that were going up and because of the attack on energy by the Biden administration, or it's the food prices, the baby formula shortage, they know that they have an issue. Now, they've tried to blame it on everything else. They've tried to blame it on Putin. They've tried to blame it on Republicans. They've tried to blame it on Democrats that they don't like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. But the reality is here is Joe Biden could read poll numbers like anybody else. His staff can read poll numbers. And so it's just interesting to me, and I wanted to point out the juxtaposition here. You hear a lot about why did Joe Biden go to Saudi Arabia and meet with those killers of the journalists and these people who don't give rates, although they never bring up the fact that the Saudi Arabia and most of the Middle East has a very dim view of homosexuality. In fact, it is banned. They don't bring that part up. I never heard the press talk about that in the, quote, openness of their society. What they're trying to do is cover up the fact that Joe Biden's failed administration is going to the Middle East to beg for oil. And that oil is going to come here. Now, if they have enough, what they also are trying to now sort of, well, they don't have any more that they can produce. Joe Biden understands the political reality is if the gas prices and the diesel prices do not come down, then November is going to be even worse than than they had predicted right now. And so that's why you're there. But again, it's interesting to me, and why I wanted to point it out here on the Doug Collins podcast, the discussion part going on here is not necessarily, there is some genuine Saudis on anything, especially after the killing of the Washington Post journalist. However, the over coverage of that event is, frankly, I believe, covering for the fact that there is an issue they don't want to talk about, and that is the fact that Joe Biden is in the Middle East begging for oil. So when you look at it, it continues on. What is covered and what is not covered. It has been all over the country now since the Uvalde shooting and then you had the Buffalo shooter. You've had other shootings going on in which guns were used to kill innocent children in the Texas situation, others in Buffalo and other places that have the people have used guns to create death and terror where they go, which has caused the uptick in the legislation to infringe Second Amendment rights, from my perspective, to make really no difference in the effect of these communities or to affect the actual people who bought these weapons to start with. We had this bipartisan bill that actually does nothing that Joe Biden signed, and when he had to try and have a celebration, he was even heckled by people in the audience that he had invited to this celebration of a gun bill that in the end probably is not going to do much of anything except make it harder for legal gun owners to buy and sell their guns. And that's all that these laws will ever do. The laws will only affect, for the most part, those people who are wanting to do it legally. Now, if they've now determined, though, in the House of Representatives that they want to take it a step further, and that is they're banning the assault weapons ban is come back into the United States House. Again, at the end of the day, if they want to, quote, even remotely accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, they got to take the guns. They just don't want you to. They've just for years have never wanted to admit that. But it is interesting. Just within the past few hours, the shooting in Greenwood Park at a mall in which a gunman came into it. A young person came in, brought his weapons into the mall, stayed in the bathroom for over an hour, I guess getting up the courage to go out and use a gun to kill people, comes out of the bathroom, shoots someone, then shoots a couple other people in the food court. But you don't have a large you have a tragic body count of 4. You do not have the mass body count that you saw in some of these others. And the reason is driving the gun control and the left just uncontrollably upset. And that was a citizen, a person who was carrying their own weapon, within 2 minutes confronted the gunman, within 2 minutes took out the gunman and kept him from killing more people. Now, in 2 minutes, the police could have not gotten there. Undoubtedly, security was not armed or nowhere close by, but someone within 2 minutes took the initiative, took their own firearm that they were carrying, used that firearm to subdue and to kill the shooter who was taking aim at innocent people. Now, this is not a story. Every one of these other stories has been front page news. Everybody wants to talk about it. MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, it doesn't matter. They even think about who they're sending their live anchors to do, if it's a mall shooting or a school shooting or wherever. And in this one, you can barely find it on most of their websites. Why? Because it involves a use of a gun for self-defense that actually stopped the massacre from developing further than it already has. Now, the death and tragedy of these people who were killed is beyond recognition and beyond words for those families. But can you imagine just for a moment if that person was there who he didn't bring his gun that day? And nobody was there. And what actually happened was a person who properly armed, properly thought through, and properly used that weapon to subdue and kill someone who was killing people just because, for whatever reason, he wanted to. It's interesting to me, like I said, that instead of celebrating the fact that a properly armed citizen used that firearm in a proper way, is not being celebrated. Instead, many of the gun control advocates are upset because they're saying he shouldn't have had the gun in the mall to start with. Just think about that. If you're a gun control advocate and you're going to talk to the families in that mall, in that food court that night, and you're going to make the argument that this person shouldn't have had a gun, and yet he took out the shooter within 2 minutes, how do you look them in the face? Because if they hadn't, they would have possibly been killed themselves. But this is the problem that you have when the story doesn't fit the narrative. Just like in Saudi Arabia with Joe Biden. When the story doesn't fit the narrative, you got to spin it or ignore it. And that's becoming too far and too common in our society today, is that when you have the left who is willing to look the other way and not deal with the true story, when they're only ready to deal with the story that they want and only being able to give the proper coverage to what they want to cover, then you have a problem. And this is frankly being shown up in how we're seeing all this reported. Now, there's another story that I want to get to that has been one that is frankly very frustrating to me. It's been very frustrating to many who have dealt with the Biden administration and others dealing with the border. The open border is just become something that is known here in the U.S. The Democrats accept it. The mainstream media accepts it. If it wasn't for Fox and some of the others who actually cover the story of these immigrants crossing over, we've had 6 months in a row of over 200,000 apprehensions. Now, really, that's only the apprehensions, not the ones who've already gotten through. There are literally hundreds of thousands of millions who are getting through without ever being stopped. Sometimes they sense them on their sensors, but they can't get there quick enough, or some they just don't see at all. This open border situation has been horrific, and you even have now the mayor of Washington, D.C. saying that they're tricking illegal immigrants on buses and planes to get them to come to cities like D.C., in which they're overwhelming the social services of those cities. This is a disaster. Do you hear it? If this on any media right now? No. You listen to the Doug Collins podcast, you listen to wherever, you listen to some other media, you may hear about it, but you're not going to hear about it in the way that you would hear about it if this was happening under Donald Trump or anybody else, frankly, at this matter, especially a Republican. They would be crying a crisis on the border. They would be down there with nightly newscasts. They would basically move the whole news crew to the border to highlight the poor job that they would say Republicans were doing if there was this kind of a massive overrun of the border. Biden administration barely touched it. The border czar, the vice president, I still think she's looking for where the border is, because she still hasn't done anything and she still hasn't worked on it. But there was an incident last year, and I want to sort of sum up today's podcast to showing that what is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to like to say. On September 19th, 2021, there was an incident in which 15,000 Haitian migrants crossed the border from Mexico and were concentrated in the Del Rio section of Texas. Now, I want to just stop here and say, for all of you out there who have this liberalized version of what's going on at the border, that is simply these poor Mexican migrants, these poor people from the Central America, from Guatemala, from El Salvador and Ecuador and Costa Rica and Panama and all these, they're coming up through, and they're simply poor families coming to make a better life. It's not just from this area. There's been almost every country in the world have had people caught at our border. There's drugs, there's firearms, there's all kinds of things passing through, and we have a border patrol that is demoralized because Secretary Mayorkas is completely inept at his job and needs to be impeached or quit to do the people a favor, because his job and one and only job is to keep our homeland safe, and he's not doing either. Keeping our homeland safe or protecting our border. Nothing is happening. But this situation last year with these 15,000 Haitian immigrants, not Central American, Haitian immigrants, migrants coming across, the Texas Department of Public Safety called upon the Del Rio Station's Horse Patrol unit from the Border Patrol to come and assist them. Many of you may have remembered this. There were some very graphic pictures that came out showing what appeared to be the Border Patrol agents treating these migrants in a very harsh way, or in a very, frankly, illegal way, whipping them with their reins. Don't remember this? Let me remind you. President Joe Biden says, this was a couple of days after it came out. He said, but it was a horrible what you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses nearly running them over, and people being strapped. It's outrageous, I promise you. And these people will pay, and they will be an investigation is underway now. This is an embarrassment. It's beyond embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. President Joe Biden, September last year. Secretary Mayorkas, the actual head of the agency. I was horrified by what I saw. We'll let the investigations run its course, but, now notice how he's like to say, oh, we're going to investigate it, but I've already made my determination. Hold on to this one. But the pictures that I observed trouble me profoundly. Mayorkas told CNN, one cannot weaponize a horse to aggressively attack a child. This is unacceptable. This is not what our policy and training require. We will not tolerate mistreatment. This was the day of the incident. Vice President Harris goes on to invoke images of some of the worst moments of our history where that kind of behavior has been used against indigenous people of our country and has been used against African Americans during times of slavery. Even Speaker Pelosi had to jump in and say the mistreatment of Haitian migrants fleeing violence and devastation from natural disasters is deeply troubling, including the inappropriate use of what appears to be whips by Border Patrol officers on horseback to intimidate migrants. Now, you heard all of this, and it was on the news, and, as opposed to an open border, which is never on the news, you have seen that story was run over and over and over again. Well, guess what? For many of us who actually was asking the questions on what actually happened, talking to Border Patrol and saying, what do you find here? The report has now been released. That investigation at Mayorkas said, oh, we're going to investigate this, but here's what I found. On July 8th of this year, the Customs and Border Protection Agency published the Office of Professional Responsibilities investigation report into the Horse Patrol unit activity in Del Rio, Texas on last September 19th, 2021. They found problems in some training, communication, but here's the bottom line. It says there is no evidence that Border Patrol agents involved in this incident struck, intentionally or otherwise, any migrant with their reins. This report's been out since July 8th. Have you heard about it? Have you seen it? Has it not been plastered across every mainstream media, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to the LA Times? I'm sorry, did I miss the press conference from Joe Biden where he went back and said, I misspoke here, got a little ahead of my game here, and I want to apologize to those brave men and women of the Border Patrol who were trying in a sea of 15,000 migrants crossing our border, that they were doing the best they could and actually ended up doing it as well as they could and properly, and never hit or strapped, as we heard from originally. I haven't seen Joe Biden's apology. I haven't heard Secretary Mayorkas apologizing even to his own department. Vice President Harris, there's no apology coming from here. They strapped. And comparing it back to days of slavery in Vice President Harris's words. And then Nancy Pelosi Again, no words of apology to these men and women who are doing everything they can to basically put their finger in the flood of immigrants coming across our border, because this administration has chose to have an open border policy that is overflowing not just our border states, but every state in the union. And to do this, and for these Border Patrol agents to hear their own commander-in-chief, their own secretary of their department, to hear others abuse them, call them names, call them out, accuse them of doing wrongdoing, accuse them basically of illegal acts, when this is what they hear. And then at the other point of this, they don't actually apologize. You don't even see it actually reported. This report has been out since July the 8th, and we've seen nothing so far from the administration. This is why people are becoming more and more concerned. This is why you, and many of you are conservative who listen to this podcast. Let me say, you've got to dig for answers. You've got to point out the truth and hypocrisy as it comes up. Because if we're to convince voters and people to side with conservatives and to fix these problems, such as an open border, to fix problems such as an energy plan from this administration that has basically tried to decimate and destroy energy independence in this country. If you're actually looking to real solutions and real questions and real concerns concerning gun violence in this country, you've got to also step up and acknowledge that when the gun is properly used and properly carried and held out in 2 minutes to stop a mass shooting in its tracks, you've got to acknowledge that is a proper use of a firearm and not attack the one who actually stepped forward to save individuals. You see, when we get into this kind of focus, it is this liberal focus of deflecting. It's understanding that if you want to destroy American energy independence, then you're going to have to go and get oil from other places, even if it's places like Saudi Arabia, where they kill journalists and they keep women in check and homosexuality is banned, and all of these human rights violations that conveniently been ignored by the left for years, until now when they're trying to cover up the fact that Joe Biden is there begging for oil. Again, as you look at this, let's think about it. Dig deeper, because there's a need in our country, if we're to overcome and to fight for the fact that we should be a place in which justice and freedom are promoted, and there should be no two forms of justice anywhere in this country. Stories like this have to come out. I'm going to keep bringing them to you here on the Doug Collins Podcast. I'm encouraging you. If you already subscribe to this, thank you so much. It means the world to me that you're subscribing to this podcast. You get it every time it's posted on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We thank you for that. Keep it up. But if you could do me a favor, share it with 5 or 10 of your friends. Share the podcast. Let them see what they're getting so that they can be better informed to go out and be fighters for truth as they go forward. Visit me at the DougCollinsPodcast.com. You can also sign up for a possibility to win a trip to come and be a part of this podcast and sit in with me as I do the podcast. If we can work it out, we may even have you involved in the podcast. But you can go and sign up for that. It's a trip being planned by our folks at Salem and for their talkers, and I'm one of them, and I'd love to have you go and sign up. Maybe you'll win that trip. Come visit me here in Georgia, and we'll have a great time with the podcast. This is the way it is. We're going to report things that others don't report. We're going to talk about solutions that others aren't talking about, because the Doug Collins Podcast is about finding answers, living life, and enjoying what we have been gifted here in this great United States. God bless you. We'll see you next time on the Doug Collins Podcast. Hey, everybody. I just want to talk about sleep. You know why I want to talk about sleep? It's because I just got out from underneath my MyPillow bed sheets and my pillow that I keep under my head every night, because I like to sleep on my side. I like to sleep on my back. I like to sleep, I move at night, and MyPillow is just the best thing that goes under my head. It keeps me getting restful sleep. The sheets are amazing. It's just what you need. Everybody understands you need 7 hours of sleep. Why not sleep in some of the best products out there? And Mike and the folks at MyPillow are great folks to do this with. And you can go to mypillow.com, or you can call them at 800-564-8475. Use code word Collins, Collins. You won't want to miss this. If you have not got these Giza bed sheets, you need them. They're amazing. They're soft. They don't wear out. You need those to get that sleep against your body at night and provide that cooling, just soothing nature that lets you get the most sleep. But they're not just about bed sheets and pillows. They also have the My Slippers. Amazing. I've talked to you about it before. I don't wear slippers, but I do wear My Slippers. They're amazingly comfortable. You can wear them outside. You can wear them inside. Great products. You've got towels. You've got all kinds of stuff. Go to MyPillow.com. It's spring cleaning time. It's springtime to get out there and try and buy new things. Replace some of your old stuff. You'll want to replace your towels. Get some other products for your bedroom. All at MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com, or call 800-564-8475. Use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, when you check out. I guarantee you will be satisfied.